I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, Jake, you're finally doing a character deep dive, and who do you do it for? Do you do it for Kaladin, for Rand, for Harry Dresden? No, I chose Elhokar from the Stormlight Archives, and you're probably confused as to why, but we're gonna get into it. Let's go. So, obviously this is going to have Stormlight Archives spoilers, because it's a character deep dive. So, if you're not caught up on the Stormlight Archives, then get out, and this is obviously, Elhokar obviously isn't my favorite Stormlight character, but he is the Stormlight character who my appreciation of has increased the most on rereads, and, I'm here to talk to you about my boy Elhokar, and, the really, really well fleshed out and well written character behind what people think is just kind of a doofus. Are you a god? I defy you, creature. I claim your life. They will see their gods crushed, just as they will see their king dead at my feet. I defy you. How did you know how to be a hero? When I try to be strong, I make a fool of myself. When I try to be merciful, people walk over me. When I try to listen to counsel, it turns out I've picked the wrong men. When I try to do everything on my own, Dalinar has to take over lest I ruin the kingdom. How do people know what to do? Why don't I know what to do? I was born to this office, given the throne by the Almighty himself. Why would he give me the title, but not the capacity? It defies reason. And yet, everyone seems to know things I do not. My father could rule. Even the likes of Sadius. Men loved Gavilar, feared him, and served him all at once. I can't even get a Dark Eyes to obey a command to come visit the palace. Why doesn't this work? What do I have to do? Greatness will define me, Navani. No mediocre effort by someone like Dalinar or my son could undermine that, and I personally doubt Elhokar could rise to even mediocre. Elhokar glanced at him, and for a moment, Kaladin felt he could see the real king. Not because the illusion was failing, but because of the way Elhokar's lips tightened, his brow creased, and his gaze became so intense. I was referring to my own limitations. When I fail this city, I want to make sure you are there to protect it. Life before death. Strength before weakness. Journey before. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about kind of what everyone's first impression is of Elhokar on the first time you read the Stormlight Archive. Because you're probably not paying that much attention to Elhokar because he's Elhokar. So you're like, okay, you first meet him from Dalinar's perspective, basically thinking about how much of a dumbass he is for trying to, run up a hill, and then he's going to, distract the Chasm Fiend when Dalinar has the Rishadium. And then basically he's the doofus king who Brandon had to make the case for murdering him relatively reasonable. And then, he's the person who Kaladin realizes he's trying, but still kind of a doofus, and so he saves Elhokar. And you still, at this point, you don't like Elhokar. He's arrogant, especially through Kaladin in prison. Oh, what an idiot. What a doofus. Why do I like this guy? And then in Oathbringer, he becomes slightly less of a doofus, and then he dies. And also, if you've only read up to Oathbringer, I am going to talk about something from the Rhythm of War prologue, but obviously I can't spoil that much for Elhokar's arc because he's dead. Anyway, what I want to talk about is actually how Elhokar became the way that he is. Because I think there's a lot of context of Elhokar's life that is really just missed if you aren't really paying attention. And the first thing is, this is the part from the Rhythm of War prologue, and that's most young princes who are raised to be kings are taught how to be a king when their father is the king. But Gavilar was trying to become immortal, so he wasn't really he didn't really train Elhokar how to be king at all, because he didn't think Elhokar was ever going to be king, because he was expecting to be the king forever. So, right off the bat, Elhokar isn't really going to know. And then suddenly, when Elhokar's like 14, Gavilar dies. It's like, Gavilar was expected to live forever, and he's dead. And then so now you have the boy king, and what people have told me is, Elhokar should have just trusted his advisors, but then you put a couple seconds and you think, who would his advisors be at that time? Well, number one, we got Dalinar. Oh yeah, that sounds good, except this isn't Oathbringer Dalinar or Words of Radiance Dalinar. This is the Dalinar who's been drinking constantly for the last 5 years, and is basically just like a wreck, and also a tyrant, and probably the biggest murderer on the planet. So at this point, Dalinar is not exactly what you would call advisor material. Okay, who's the next most important advisor? Sadeas. I think I don't need to explain why Elhokar stepping back and leaving Sadeas in charge is what you'd call unfeasible. So then his third advisor at the time, who kind of just got put in charge of stuff by default, was Rashon. So yeah, Elhokar doesn't exactly have a lot of reliable subordinates to delegate things to. So, alright, you're like 14 or whatever, and your dad died, and he didn't really train you to be king because he was expecting to live forever. Also, you're probably going to be pretty damn paranoid, because not only did your dad die, an assassin who came completely out of nowhere, who we knew nothing about, just walked in through all Gavilar's security while he was in Shardplate and killed him. So, this could now happen to you at any time. Like, you have no idea. You don't know that the Parshendi ordered Gavilar killed because he was going to, release the Parshendi gods and the Voidbringers. You're just and trying to bring back the Night Radiant. You're just holy shit. This assassin just showed up to kill the King of Elhokar, which is me now. And as far as I know, you have no real way of stopping it. And it's not like it's not like you have a reason to believe it wouldn't happen this time. It's why wouldn't they just kill the King of Elhokar again? So, anyone who doesn't understand why Elhokar is paranoid, I'm pretty sure if you were not expecting to become the king of a kingdom that was a fairly new kingdom and not stable at all, with a bunch of schemers for another few decades, and then suddenly a super mysterious assassin showed up, went through all the security, and killed Gavilar, who's one of the best swordsmen on the planet, while he was in Shardplate in a duel, and now suddenly you're king at a super unage, and all your advisors vary from monsters to ridiculously untrustworthy, you would probably be paranoid as well. And then, to add to that, it's that, when he talks in Way of Kings and Words of Radiance about seeing things in, the shadows and the mirrors, he wasn't hallucinating. Those were the cryptics. Do you remember, you all read Way of Kings for the first time when Shallan accidentally draws the cryptic? She freaked out, as do most people who read it. That's what Elhokar's going through. But you're not told this, you kind of just have to figure it out. And you only see it from Dalinar's perspective, so it's just yeah, whatever, this idiot kid is paranoid. But, he's seeing random mathematical formulas show up in the corner of his eye. And his father was mysteriously assassinated. So, Elhokar is mentally going through a lot here. And then we get to be alright, but Dalinar, he goes to the Night Watcher, and reformed Dalinar is here. I'll go to the Shattered Plains, and you'd think, okay, Elhokar could leave Dalinar in charge now, which, is basically what he does. But the thing is, Dalinar basically, in his own head, he obviously was trying to do right for Elhokar, but he really sucked at being an advisor. He kind of tried to take a middle ground, where on one side, he could have just basically took over and effectively ruled out the Alethi. And that probably would have, been a decent idea. Because then you have the rightfully paranoid, totally untrained and unprepared, and not particularly talented king. But also, it's like, it's kind of the self-fulfilling prophecy, where it's like, Gavilar's like, well, we don't need to train this guy to be king, and then it's like, oh, look, he sucks at being king. Yeah, who could see this coming? So if Dalinar did that, that puts Elhokar in a reasonable position. Or if Dalinar doesn't overstep and just, do whatever he wants, that kind of puts probably not as easy a position, because, well, I mean, he still has to, figure out how to rule, but at least it seems like his rule is stable. Instead, you get Dalinar just, doesn't do really anything for Elhokar, but also just does whatever he wants and doesn't go through for anything where he should go through the king. He doesn't. He just does it himself. So you get this really weird position where for Elhokar, where he has to do everything for the king because Dalinar's not doing it, but also it's obvious he's not in charge. So now he's in this just ridiculous ruling position where not only does he have to do the normal things a king would have to do, and because he doesn't have an older advisor doing it for him, but also while doing it, everyone knows he's not actually in charge. But I mean, none of this is to say Elhokar is actually a good king. If you put Dalinar in Elhokar's position, obviously he would do a better job. But it's not so much that Elhokar's a good king, it's that his position makes him seem way worse than he actually is. To add to this and make it more ridiculous, not only is he just in this position as a king in a normal time, he's stuck as the king directly after the kingdom was formed during one of the first unified war Elhokar has, and at the start of a desolation. And it's the first desolation in 4,000 years. And yeah, he's still arrogant, and when Kaladin's absolutely screwed the pooch at the end of the duel at the end of part 3 of Words of Radiance. But it's also the arc he goes through on this book, when you actually think of it from Elhokar's perspective, is way more nuanced than just there's the doofus who became slightly less of a doofus and then he died. And we haven't even gotten into Oathbringer, where he actually things start picking up for Elhokar. And look at this, the second where he sets up the High King thing, where Dalinar is no longer in charge of the Alethi, Dalinar is in charge of Urethru, and he's the king of Elhokar. And things actually start working out better for him. Shockingly. Who could have seen this coming? And also it helps that in terms of advisors and subordinates, upgrading from your top guys having to be a choice between Roshone and Sadius to Kaladin is what we call an upgrade. And he really, in Words of Radiance, he has an arc. His character arc behind the scenes that you have to pay attention for is accepting that he fucks up a lot. And he basically comes to the conclusion that he's not a very good king. And he's might not be the worst king ever, but you were in extraordinary circumstances, and he's definitely not an extraordinary king. And so you have him leading the group back to Kholinar to liberate Kholinar from the singers, I guess, from the Voidbringers. And you really get to see him actually start to shine in these. And it's kind of, he's starting the redemption arc that he so deserves. And so, at the end of Oathbringer, he finally, he was going to swear the first ideal, and he was going to be a Lightweaver, and so he was going to give his first truth as well. And Elhokar's first truth was going to be, I am a bad king. But we didn't get that because of Moash. God damn it. And, it really, some people might think, that it came out of nowhere. It really didn't. He was going towards that for all of Way of Kings and Words of Radiance. But we actually get to see him more. And also, it's most of the time we see him in the first couple books, it's from the perspective of Dalinar or Kaladin. And Dalinar's kind of just, he basically just sees him as someone he has to protect. Dalinar doesn't see Elhokar as someone with agency. He just sees someone as a potential casualty that he needs to try and protect. And let's say Kaladin is maybe not the most fair judge of characters when it comes to the king, especially since like he's like expecting like, oh, the king should be like the most regal person, and you know, Elhokar's just a dude. Like as we had in the intro, just because he was born to be the king doesn't actually give him the ability to be like better at being the king than an average person. But he does a pretty good job in Kholinar. Like he actually like behind the scenes assembles nobles and assembles a reasonable sized force, and it's just, you know, the cards were kind of stacked against him because he thought he was rescuing his wife when really his wife was corrupted by odium, which, I mean, there's not much he could have done about it there, but it was an admirable effort, damn it. Which kind of sums up Elhokar, the admirable effort. And, like, yeah, obviously, even though I find him really interesting, I know he's not, like, a great person, but what he is a really, like, we all think that if we were in these books, we'd be like Kaladin or Adolin. Most of us would be Elhokar. Like, if we got put in Elhokar's situation, most of us would be Elhokar. Most of us would not be good at being king. We'd be terrified of glowing assassins. We'd be freaking out about the weird spren that we're seeing in the corner of our eyes. And we'd be frustrated as hell with, like, Dalinar somehow managing to walk over us and not actually doing anything for us. So I just kind of wanted to highlight what's going on with him. So I'm kind of run out of things to say, but this is kind of my pitch on why Elhokar does not deserve people's hate, and is actually one of an fantastically well-written character. And I hope if anyone here ever rereads the series, gives you something to think about when you're reading the parts with Elhokar. Let me know in the comment if I changed your mind on Elhokar, whether you already really liked Elhokar, or whether you still think he's a useless doofus who shouldn't have been king. And also, fuck Moash.